All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our October, I guess our fall installment of the Intelligence for Admins webinar series. Today we're doing something fun. We're doing something new. We're going to be doing a little workshop. So the idea is that we're going to get a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more interactive with it than we have in the past, right? So for those of you that have joined that I know, welcome back. Thanks for joining again. And for those of you who are new, I'm Derek. I lead our customer education efforts here at TrackVia. Got a couple other folks from the TrackVia team that are going to help out with the workshop today. So I'll let them go ahead and say hi. So I don't know if you want to say hi, Kate.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Kate Zornow here, VP of Services. Excited to do some data modeling with y'all today.
Hey everyone, I am Kim Trapkis here in product marketing, and pretty excited to see how this new format's going to go.
Yeah, definitely. The workshop should be fun. So I guess a little, word of, not of caution, but, just bear with us. This is the first time we're doing something like this. So, we'll do our best, but we'll see how this goes, right? Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just flip over to the next slide and do a couple of housekeeping things before we actually jump in. So normally, if you've joined one of these webinars in the past, we ask you to participate through the chat feature of GoToWebinar. Today, we're doing something a little different. You are going to have the ability to actually unmute yourself and speak. Yeah, crazy. So if you have a question, feel free to use the raise hand feature of GoToWebinar. That'll kind of be our indication that you've got a question, and then we'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself, and you can ask your question, right? So in a couple of seconds here, you'll get unmuted. If you could please mute yourself and remain muted while you're not speaking, that would help us just reduce background noise. Okay. As always, we're recording the webinar, and we'll send the recording out within 48 hours of the webinar. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and allow everybody to unmute. So if you're looking at the control panel, just go ahead and re-mute yourself if you are unmuted. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the agenda here. What are we talking about today? Well, we are doing a data modeling workshop, right? So all applications are built on top of a data model, right? Where you store your data. So we're first going to talk about terminology, right? We're gonna throw out a lot of terms throughout the session today. We just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what they mean, right? So we'll start with terminology. Then we'll talk about tables and relationships, the two most important concepts of a data model. Okay. We'll look at some common data structures that we've seen folks build in their TrackVia applications. And then we get into the fun stuff. We'll do some exercises. So we'll do one exercise as a big group together. I'll kind of lead that exercise. And then we will separate out into breakout groups. Okay, so we'll all break out into smaller groups, do an exercise where you can learn from each other, work with each other, and then we'll regroup and review the results of those breakout exercises. And we'll talk about some key takeaways and just wrap things up. Okay, so that's what the session today is going to look like. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it, starting with some terminology. Okay, there are 4 key terms that I want to talk about. Okay, the first and probably the most important is a table. Okay, we've tried to define each of these terms in just the simplest way that we possibly could, and that's what we've come up with here. So let's start by defining a table. The table is kind of the base entity where you are storing all of the information that you collect in your application. Okay, so it's a collection of data specifically structured in fields and records. So think about an Excel spreadsheet. It's got columns and it's got rows. Okay, and then in the intersection of all the rows and the columns, that's your data. That's where your data values go. That's essentially a table, data stored in rows and columns. Okay. Now at TrackVia, we refer to rows and columns a little bit differently. We call them fields. Okay, so a field and a column are synonymous, right? A field is a set of values that has a specific data type. Okay, so if your field is called first name, maybe that's a, a text data type. If your field is a date, right, then you can only enter date values into that field, right? So you define the way that people enter information through the fields in your table. Okay. And then a row or a record is the third term we're going to talk about. So in Excel, you'd call it a row, right? In TrackVia, we call it a record, and that is a single row from a table, okay? Now, it might be a little bit meta here, but we're actually looking at a table right now on my screen, right? We've got a couple of fields, right? There's a term field and there's a definition field. So we have two fields in our table, and we've got, oh, wrong way. We've got 4 records in our terminology table. Okay, so a table is made up of fields and records. Okay, now tables don't just live on their own, right? Every application is made up of multiple tables that are connected to each other. A relationship defines how records and tables are related to each other. Okay, it's what makes any application, TrackVia application, thrive, right? Are the relationships between your tables. So let's look at another example of a table. This is a customers table, right? We can see that there are 4 fields in this table: first name, last name, email address, and phone number. And there are 4 records in this table: Michael, Pam, Dwight, and Jim. Okay. You can see that each field is a specific data type, right? Last name is text, and the email field is an email address, right? If there was another date field, it would be all dates in that field, and so forth. And then each row or record is the information that pertains to, the first row, all the information pertains to Michael. The second row, all the information pertains to Pam. Okay, so this is a table. Questions about tables? Pause there for a second. Anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question? I know, it's scary talking on one of these webinars. That's okay. I know there'll be some questions as we go. All right, so let's talk about relationships then, right? So we just talked about tables. We defined what a table is. Relationships are kind of the second most important thing. And there are 2 types of relationships in a table structure, okay? A one-to-many relationship is the most common and core type of relationship, okay? A one-to-many relationship means that a record or one record in a table can have many records from another table, okay? And there's a million examples of this. I put one up on the screen here. One building can have many rooms. Think about your office building, right? You're in one building and there are many rooms within that building, okay? That is a one-to-many relationship, right? There's lots of others. One tree can have many branches, right? One branch can have many leaves. One person can have many fingers, right? Whatever it is, right? One to many, okay? The other type of relationship that is common is a many-to-many relationship. And the idea here is that each table can have many, or each, a record in one table can have many of the records in the other table. Classic example here, students and classes. So if we think about the relationship between a student and a class, each student can have many classes, right? If you're going to university, one student can enroll in many classes. That makes sense. With a many-to-many relationship, the inverse of that is also true. A class can have many students that enroll in it, okay? So when we think about the relationship there, it goes both ways. One can have many of the other, okay? Now, the diagram that I have here on the screen is what a many-to-many relationship looks like conceptually. This is not how we actually implement the data structure, okay? This is what a many-to-many relationship looks like physically. When we're actually designing the database, designing the tables and the relationships, this is the way that we want to do it. We use what's called a join table to facilitate many-to-many relationships. Rather than linking your tables directly to each other, they're linked indirectly through a third table. In this case, it would make sense for that table to be called enrollments, right? Each student is going to have many enrollments, and each class is going to have many enrollments. There is no direct relationship between students and classes. Okay, so if you ever find yourself wanting to make something like you see here in the middle with the students and the classes in the conceptual diagram, you want to think, okay, I actually need a third join table. Okay, so we'll get some practice with this today. Questions on the relationships? No. I don't see any hands raised. Okay. I do see a hello from Amir. Hi, Amir. Okay. All right, so let's actually just look at an example, right? So here's our one-to-many, our buildings and rooms, right? So we have a buildings table, right? Which is a unique list of buildings. And then we have a rooms table, which is a unique list of rooms. Those are our two tables. We can see that there is a relationship between these two tables because they share a field here, building number. And we can see that one building can have multiple rooms, right? Building 1 has 2 rooms, building 2 has 3 rooms, right? So we can see that there is a one-to-many relationship when we look at the data, right, between these two tables. Okay. And then an example of the one-to-many with students and classes, our students table would look like a unique list of students, never repeating, right? Derek wouldn't be in here twice, Kate wouldn't be in here twice. It's a unique list of students. We have a unique list of classes, right? So Database 101, Groovy, any other classes that our university might offer, right? And then we have this enrollments table that serves to associate the students with the classes. So here you can see that a student can be enrolled in multiple classes, right? Derek is enrolled in Database 101 and Groovy 201. Kate is enrolled in Groovy 201. Same goes for the classes to enrollments. Each class can be enrolled, or can have many people enrolled in it. So Groovy has 2 people in it. Database 101 just has 1 person in it. Okay, so that's what this join table of enrollments does. It brings those 2 things together. All right. So let's just take a look at some common data structure archetypes, right? Over the last 15 years, right, at TrackVia, we've seen, I can't even guess, how many apps we've seen built. Thousands, tens of thousands of applications have been built on the TrackVia platform, right? We've seen a lot of data structures. And a lot of them end up sharing similar components, right? Even though they're wildly different apps that do different things, they all tend to have some things that, overlap in the underlying data structure. Okay, so we pulled out a couple here that we see frequently, right? The first is an archetype of people and activities, right? So in this archetype or in this structure, you've got a table that houses a list of people, right? Whether those are patients or customers or employees or whoever it might be, it's a list of people. And then a table that houses activities or things that they are doing, right? So if you're tracking patients in your people table, maybe that's appointments in the activities table. If you're tracking customers in your activities table, maybe that's support tickets for those customers, right? If you're building a CRM, maybe that's contacts and activities like emails or phone calls that you've had with them, right? So this people and activities relationship, super common, we see it all the time. Okay. Another common one is requests, is a request type architecture. So you can think of, there's, a million types of requests out there. Maybe You're putting in a request to your IT team for new software that you need or access to an application. Maybe one of your customers or people are putting in a request for an operational improvement for your organization. Or maybe, you know, you have somebody from outside your organization putting in a request for a scholarship or a grant or something like that, right? But either way, you have a main requests table, and each of those requests is linked to a status, right? Maybe it's requested, and then the next status is being reviewed, and the next one is completed, right? Whatever, in progress, completed, right? A request goes through multiple statuses, okay? And then usually per request, you also get some comments, right? That allow people to have a back and forth conversation about that request. So a request can have multiple comments, right? Another data structure we see quite frequently. Two more, let's look at two more. Probably the most common many-to-many archetype that we see, an order and line items, okay? If you're shopping on Amazon.com, this is the architecture that you're using, right? That Amazon is pretty much built on top of, right? You're browsing Amazon, you're seeing a list of their products. When you want to buy one of those products, you add that as an item to your cart, right? So when you're building out your cart in Amazon, you're actually building out that line item table. And then when you go to checkout, it asks you, okay, you know, what's the billing address? What's the shipping address? What type of shipping do you want? All that information, that's order information, okay? So ultimately, when you go on Amazon, you're placing an order that has many line items, and those line items are associated with the products in the Amazon store, right? So this type of architecture, really common for orders like I just described, really common for quotes. Maybe you're providing, you know, one of your customers a quote on services. Your employees are submitting expense reports, you know, receipts that you're printing out, anything like that. Purchase orders have line items, right? Line item table, really common. Last archetype here is for assets, right? This one is really all about tracking things, okay? So whether those things are vehicles and equipment or technology that you're lending out to your employees, like computers or monitors or whatever it might be, or you're a hospital and you track furniture, right? Where are hospital beds? Where are the chairs, right? What rooms are they in, right? Anytime you're tracking things in places, this is the type of architecture that we see, right? You have an assets table, you have a locations table, and then you have this join table between the two that says this asset was in this location on this date, and then it was on this location on another date, right? And you can kind of manage its history through that join table. Any questions about any of these archetypes? No. All right. Okay. If you have a question, raise your hand, unmute, say something. Yeah. All right. Let's move on then to our group exercise. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to close down this window. I'm going to pop open another window here. So what you should be seeing now is what's called a Jamboard, right? This is just a simple Google tool. Okay. Now, on the left side of this Jamboard, I've got a simple use case for an application that we might want to build. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through this use case, we're going to read it, and we are going to define the table structure that is needed to accomplish the requirements of the users of the use case here. Okay, so we're going to kind of break that down together. I'll kind of lead this exercise. Right now, when we go into our own breakout groups or in our smaller breakout groups, everybody's going to be asked to do this kind of the same exercise with different use cases. Okay, so I'll kind of show you how we do this, and I'll show you how we use this tool for Jamboard too, just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to read this use case, and we are going to highlight things that we think are necessary to track in terms of data and categories of data. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna read it and highlight things that we think are important. And there's two major things that are important. Major nouns, okay, people, places, things, okay, that pop out through our story or through our use case here. And then just basic information that we need to keep track of. Okay, so those are the two things we're looking for. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this use case. It's a cookbook, right? It's a cookbook use case. So let's all imagine that we work together at a company called buzzword.io, which I thought I was making up, but turns out that's a real company. So you can Google it. But either way, we all that work at this company, we all love cooking, okay? And we love creating new recipes and sharing them with each other, sharing them with our colleagues, all the other folks that work at buzzword.io. But so far to date, we've kind of shared recipes via email or Slack or whatever else it is, and it's all dispersed all over the place, and we don't have one collective like cookbook to keep all our recipes in as an organization. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create the underlying structure that's needed to create this cookbook. Okay. All right, so I'm going to navigate over here to the left to this little highlighter icon. I'm going to choose the highlighter, and maybe I'm going to choose yellow here. Okay. So now as we're reading the requirements, we're going to highlight nouns and information that we need to track. So we want to allow our employees above just everyone that works here at Buzzword, right? We want them to upload recipes. Okay, so there's our first major noun, right? A recipe. Okay, and recipes should include basic information. Okay, so this basic information should make the light bulb go off in our mind saying, okay, there's things that we want to track here, basic information like prep time, number of servings, as well as a list of ingredients. There's another noun. Steps involved with making the recipe. Okay, so I'm highlighting these things. These are things I know I'm going to need to track some way in the app. Okay, recipes, prep time, number of servings, ingredients, steps, right? All of those popped out in this first paragraph here. Okay. Now for the second kind of set of requirements, we're saying that we want to track ingredients. There's ingredients again, right? The ingredients from the recipe should auto-populate some other information for the recipe. Okay, so now we're thinking back to other information that we need to track, right? It says other information like calories, carbs, fats, and sodium. These are things we want our application to keep track of. Okay, so we're going to highlight them. And finally, we want our employees to be able to review each other's recipes, write comments, provide a rating, right? If it's a really good recipe and we loved it, we'll say, hey, this is an awesome recipe, 5 stars. If we didn't like it, it's, hey, wouldn't recommend this one, 1 star. We're very transparent at buzzword.io, but that's okay, right? So in this one, right, we know that we want to start tracking reviews, right? This is kind of that first big noun that jumps out at us. And then information contained in that review are comments and ratings, right? We want to provide comments in the review, and we want to provide a rating from 1 to 5. Okay. So now I've highlighted all the things we're keeping track of. Kind of pause there for 1 minute. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so now that we've got all these things, our goal is going to be to pick out some subjects or categories for these things to organize them. Okay, so when I read this, the first thing that jumps out at me as a category is the recipe, the prep time, the number of servings, right? Ingredients, steps, those are all things that are part of the recipe, right? So it almost seems like recipe is that category, and then there's things that describe a recipe, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna flip over to the sticky note, and I'm going to start typing these things in. So we've got recipe, we've got prep time, number of servings, ingredients, steps, right? So all of these things are kind of like related to each other in some way. All right, so we'll just start with that. So I'm going to hit save and back out of here. So we've got one sticky note that's like a category of things. The second category that kind of jumps out to me is this category of like ingredient information, right? So we've got ingredients that we're tracking, and for the ingredients, we want to know what carb or calories are, involved with each ingredient, carbs, fats, sodium, all these things that are related to the ingredient. So that's kind of like a category as well. So let's add a sticky note for that. So we've got ingredients, calories, carbs, fats, sodium. Okay. All right, so now we've got kind of a second grouping of information. And then the third grouping is that review grouping, right? We want to provide a comment and a rating, right? And that's part of this review process. So let's add one more sticky note here with reviews, comments, and rating. Okay. All right, so we've got 3 categories. Now, this is a great start, right? And what we're going to attempt to do is take these groupings and figure out what tables are needed to achieve these things. Okay, so let's just start with this one here for reviews and comments and ratings. Okay, when I think about these 3 words, I'm trying to figure out what's like the top level subject and what are the other things that are contributing to that top level subject. So when I think about this, I can picture a review is made up of a comment and a rating. So what that means to me is that the review is what the table is going to be, and the comment and the rating are going to be fields in that table. So you can actually start to picture, I have a reviews table, and one column is for the comment that they provided for the review, and one column is, the rating that they provided for that review, and then each row in that table is a review. Okay, so I'm going to actually remove comments and ratings here, or if you'd like, you can put them in parentheses, kind of like this, just so you know, okay, this is my reviews table, and in it, I'm going to have these fields. Okay, let's do the same for ingredients here, right? The top level here is the ingredient. You can imagine that this table is going to contain a list of ingredients, and then there's going to be 4 fields related to each ingredient. The calories for that ingredient, the carbs, the fats, and the sodium for each ingredient. Okay, so again, ingredients is kind of that top level, and these are all fields within that table. Okay, now this is where it gets a little tricky. Okay, if we think about recipes and prep time, number of servings, ingredients, and steps, recipes is like the whole purpose of this use case and app, right? So that's already a good indication that that's going to be a table. Recipes is going to be a table. Now, when I think about a recipe would only have one prep time, and it would only have one number of servings. So I know that those are going to be fields in the recipes table. These are pieces of information that describe a recipe. But when I get to ingredients and steps, things start to get a little bit hazier, right? A recipe can have multiple ingredients in it, and a recipe can have multiple steps, right? When you're cooking something, you step 1, preheat the oven to 350. Step 2, whatever it is, right? So one recipe can have multiple steps. So that means that if I'm going to have a recipes table, these are going to be my fields in it, prep time and number of servings. And these other 2 that have a different type of relationship with the recipe itself are going to be broken out into their own tables. Okay, we already talked about an ingredients table, so we don't need to do anything there. But we have this steps table that's needed. Okay, so we can delete that for now, hit save, and add in a steps table, right? A step is probably comprised of just a text field that says what the step is, right? Preheat the oven to 350. That's the step, right? So we're going to add another sticky note, call it steps, right? Maybe the field in that table is called like description of the step. Cool. So we have all of our base tables. Again, this is a good second step, okay? Now we need to think about how these tables relate to each other, all right? So what I'm gonna kind of do here is just rearrange them a little bit, okay? And I'm gonna click over here to this pencil icon again on the left, and I'm gonna change from the highlighter to just a pen, maybe this black pen. Okay. Now, when I think about the relationship between a recipe and a review, you just start comparing these tables and thinking about how they relate to each other. A recipe can have many reviews, right? I can review something, Kate can review the same recipe, Kim can review the same recipe. A recipe can have many reviews. Each review can only be associated with one recipe, right? So we know that there's a one-to-many relationship between recipes and reviews. Same thing kind of goes between recipes and steps. A recipe can have multiple steps in it, but each step is only associated with one recipe. So again, kind of get this one-to-many relationship between recipes and steps. Is there a relationship between reviews and steps? No, you wouldn't leave a review on a step. A step doesn't really have anything to do with a review. Not really, right? Now let's think about the relationship between recipes and ingredients. Okay, a recipe can have many ingredients. That sounds right to me, right? Logically, if you just said that, right? A recipe can have many ingredients. Sure, okay. Can one ingredient be included in multiple recipes? Totally. Do you use salt in like every recipe you ever make? Yeah, probably, right? If you're me, I like sodium. Right, so then an ingredient can also have many recipes. Great. So conceptually, that makes sense. But remember from our previous slides, right, this isn't how you actually implement this type of relationship. Here, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click this eraser. We actually need a join table that connects these two things, because when we're doing a many-to-many relationship, you need that third table. So a really common way to refer to this third table is just a combination of the two names of the table. So like a recipe ingredient, or recipe ingredients, right? So now you have this last table that your two tables relate to. So a recipe can have many recipe ingredients, and an ingredient can have many recipe ingredients as well. Okay. So the only other two tables really that we haven't compared yet are, ingredients and reviews. That doesn't really make any sense that a review can have many ingredients. Yeah, not really. And an ingredient can have many reviews. There's not really a direct relationship there. So then the ingredients and the steps. Now this one's a little bit subjective, however you however complex you want this app to be, or however robust, right? Perhaps for each step, you want to select the ingredients that they're supposed to use in that step. Or maybe it's just, I'm just going to type it in, preheat the oven to 350. No ingredients involved with that. I'm just going to type it in. So you could potentially build a relationship between these two tables. I could see a case made for that. But there's also a case to say, let's just keep the steps simple and you just provide a description of them, right? So you could relate these two tables or you could not, okay? So that's our structure, right? That is our underlying table structure that's needed to achieve this cookbook use case. Pause there. Questions about that? How we got there? Any other relationships? Tables? I see a question from Allison. Awesome. Go ahead,
Hi.
Allison. Yeah.
So could you just go over, I sort of understand, but it would help to hear it again.
Mm-hmm.
The separate postie for the recipe ingredients one. Yeah, there. So I understand that there's both of them connect, you need both to have a recipe, but can you say how you got there again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Separate.
Yep. So this middle table here for recipe ingredients, let's pretend that it doesn't quite exist at the moment. When we're thinking about the relationship between a recipe and ingredients, right? you can, if you're just stating the way that these two things are related, a recipe can probably have many ingredients in it, right? If you're making pizza, it's gonna have, which I know Kate's favorite, got pizza, right? So you're gonna have dough, you're gonna have sauce, you're gonna have cheese, right? So one recipe can have many ingredients. So that makes sense. One recipe, many ingredients. The inverse of that is also true. Each ingredient in this ingredients table, which is going to be a unique list of ingredients. So you'll have dough in there once, tomato sauce in there once, salt in there once, right? Cheese in there once. Each ingredient can be involved with multiple recipes. So this is also true. One ingredient, multiple recipes. However, this many-to-many structure is not how you actually need to define the underlying tables. And that's just for a scalability thing. If you wouldn't be able to accomplish housing your data properly if you just linked these two tables like this. You actually need a table to store the associations, okay? So rather than doing it this way, okay, you add in a third table. And you can really call this anything you'd like, right? But an easy way to do it is to say recipe ingredients, kind of like combine the two table names. Okay, so you've got your third table. Then each of your original tables that you had linked directly to each other become one-to-many with that third table. So a recipe can have multiple ingredients in it, and an ingredient can be used in multiple recipes. So that stores that association between the two things. Okay.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
That was helpful? Okay, that answered your question, Allison? Awesome.
Yes.
All right, then I don't see any other questions, so let's do our breakout groups. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're all gonna separate out into smaller individual groups. And the way that we're gonna break people up here is on a fun little game. Would you rather? Okay, so we'll kind of pose a question. You pick what you'd rather do out of the three options, all right? And then that is going to be your breakout group that you go into, okay? So kind of start with this, all right? Would you rather go on a cruise ship during a Class 5 hurricane, go snorkeling in Antarctica, or run a marathon in Death Valley? Okay, three super compelling vacations. Okay, so try to decide. You take 10 seconds, think about this. Which one would you most want to do? Okay. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna post a message in the chat of GoToWebinar. Okay, that message is going to have a Google Meet link for each of these three, one for each of the three groups. Okay, so whichever one you chose, jump into that Google Meet. Okay, remain muted in this GoToWebinar meeting, but join that Google Meet so you'll be in your smaller group. You'll probably only have 5 people in each group or something like that. Okay. I'll be in one of the groups. Kate will be in one of the groups. Kim will be in one of the groups. Sorry, I might have got muted there. So we'll be in each of the groups and we'll be there to help you with the exercise if you have questions. Okay, but the idea is same thing we just walked through. You'll get a use case and you'll try to define the underlying structure. Okay, so ready, set, go. Everybody jump into your breakout groups that you can find in the chat of the GoToWebinar. Okay, let's see. Everyone should be jumping back in here. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left. I think we've got, I think, Kate, do we have Kate? Do we have Kim? Are we here? We all 3 groups back? think Allison has a question. Go ahead, Allison.
Sorry, that was I accidentally clicked on it in the breakout group. I accidentally clicked on this hand raise. So
Okay.
I don't have a
That's
question.
fine.
Sorry.
Okay, cool. So let's quickly go through the 3 groups, use cases and results. So group cruise ship, the best group with only 2 people in it. Michael, if you want to walk us through kind of the use case here real quick in 1 minute and the solution in 1 minute. Yep.
We started off with kind of lumping things together that would be on a 1 line item that was the expense line. And then as we identified things that would be part of a table that we could do selections from, like the expense type or the customers over here, we broke those out. Looked like there should be a header of some kind for the expense report, since it had these numbers over here. And that's what this was. And then we added employees, since there's 1 employee in each expense report. And we're a little confused by the approver. We decided that it will be tied to the employee, as a one approver would have many employees, but also the improver is an employee. So we had a 1-to-many going back over, but it would really, in the app, would be a 1-to-1 relationship. And we just assumed that the invoice was a single line field that we just stuck in on the expense line, so we didn't have to worry about
it. Great, cool. So an expense reporting type application, right? Major tables are your expense report. You've got expense line items tied to employees and customers. So and this was built from an Excel spreadsheet, which a lot of times you have to build your architectures from. So nice job, cruise ship team. All right, let's jump over to Team Antarctica. Who is the spokesperson for Team Antarctica that wants to quickly talk about just where they got? And it's okay if you didn't get all the relationships and everything, but how you got to where you got to.
Yeah, we didn't even get to designating a spokesperson because we were in a group. We were still going strong. So
right.
As you can tell, we did not finalize our relationships or categorizing everything yet. But I think we did. We're doing really good. I don't know if anybody from our group wants to try to present where we're at so far, and we can try to piece the rest together here pretty quickly, I think. Or I'm happy to go ahead and kind of go through what we were doing here. So what we had was a workout situation, a personal trainer who has clients that they must keep track of all their different workouts that they're doing, the exercises that they're doing, and then any competitions that they enter and the results of those competitions. So what we're trying to do is kind of break out the information here. I think we made it almost through that. We're talking through the competition information when we landed, but so we figured that most of the client information we can group together. So we've got our clients table. We're gonna have our emails, our first name, last name, contact information, your typical information there. And then each client is going to have many workouts. So we grouped together some of the information that might be associated with a workout. So I scheduled an appointment with my trainer at, from 1 to 2:30. So we've got a start time, an end time, the date that event is going to happen, maybe the location. And there's different things that we kind of put in there, whether it's like a distance or a certain reps. So some of that we're starting to parse through as well. Then we started parsing out the exercise individually. So we're going to have our exercise, just the name of what we're doing, whether it's sit-ups, running, push-ups. And our competition, this is what we're kind of talking about when we lost track of time. So our competition, we were starting to talk about how, like, you've got your competition, you want your results, you want to have the name, person in it, the start time, the date, maybe there's registration fees, arbitrary stuff that would go into a competition. But then we started kind of gearing off towards, if I have one marathon that I've got 5 people that I'm training that are going to be in this one marathon, I can't put all the results for 5 people into one line of that marathon record. So that's where we're starting to break off and say, okay, well, hey, we probably need to create another table that is going to be our results table. So that's where we were kind of getting ready to split off the results so that we can see that one competition could have many results, and then one client could have many competition results.
Yep.
That's kind of where we left off there. So
Totally. So join table between the competitions and the clients. Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, nice job. Even though we didn't get the relationships defined, perfect, great job defining all the tables and the types of information that will go in the tables. As you start putting it together, the other tables might crop up like that results table. Okay. All right, and then the last team, Group Death Valley. So I think Kate said, Kate had dropped right at the top of the hour, but Ricky is the team lead for this one. So Ricky, I don't know if you want to unmute and just quickly talk us through the thought process in getting this app here.
Yeah, so basically your main record or header record would be your trip, the trip itself, which you would fill out with destination and a start and end dates, followed by having each trip would have multiple attendees, and each attendee would have accommodations. So the thought process there was to have the accommodation linked to a place, which would have, you know, the state and the country, followed by many photos. So you would have a separate table for the photos.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of it. I guess you could also flip around the places and the accommodations if you wanted to select the places and then select the accommodations as well.
Gotcha. Yep. And it looks like this destination or this trip only had one destination of Colorado. So potentially, yeah, your trip destination and places might have some relationship too. And if you break it out even further, but yeah, awesome. Nice job. So we're running way late on time here. So I apologize to everybody. I'm just going to kind of wrap things up. Thanks, Ricky, for going through that. Let's go ahead and key takeaways. Always organize your data into like tables and subjects. Those are your tables. When you deal with many-to-many relationships, use join tables, that conversation about having that third table. And then when you're doing the vetting of your application, remember to focus on the nouns that you want to track, and the information about those nouns become the fields for those tables. Okay. So if you're looking for additional resources for this type of information, we've got a couple of courses on the TrackVia University website that you can look at. You can always contact our support team. We've got professional services to help you out. Specifically, we even have scoping and design engagements that you can engage with our professional services team to help you do this table architecture only, right? And then we've got another webinar coming up in November for current logged in user and user group filtering. So put it on your calendars. And then we'll send you the recording.
Didn't we move that one to the 30th?
Okay, yeah, 30th, maybe because of Thanksgiving, I would imagine.
That's what you asked me.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I did ask you that, Kim. So it's on the 30th. All right. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for going over, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.